Prehistoric Pipes in Northeast Michigan by Dennis M. Morrison. This was originally published in Indian Artifacts magazine in the early 1990s and then republished as a small historical booklet from Treasure Cove Publications. In Michigan prehistory, the change from middle to late woodland was quite profound. The design of pottery, even the method of making vessels, changed. In the middle woodland, pots were made primarily by the coil snake method, whereas in the late woodland, they were made by the slab method. Projectile points also changed. Old types were forgotten, new ones emerged, and few styles from prior periods were revived. It all becomes a little confusing. It was during the late woodland that agriculture entered the picture and man began to harvest crops here in Michigan. One of those crops was tobacco, but just how it came on the scene is unknown. Its introduction, however, seems to have been quite well received, and the use of tobacco became firmly ingrained in the late woodland lifestyle. The remains of prehistoric pipes in northeast Michigan and the Great Lakes region are quite common, though most people do not recognize them as anything other than ordinary pot shards. This is not surprising when you come to realize how many collectors here do not even recognize a pot shard out in the field. For the record, in Michigan, the late woodland extends from AD 700 until cultural contact was made with the first Europeans. In general, the woman took care of the agricultural concerns of our local tribes. However, tobacco had a secular as well as a religious use. It was used in quantity by men and women both, but its cultivation seems to have been left to the men. Little is written of the cultivation of tobacco in the Great Lakes, but Kinnetz in his Indians of the Western Great Lakes points out the only other exception to the general consensus that the woman had charge of agriculture is in a statement by Pierre Boucher that it is men who cultivated the fields of tobacco. There was no contradiction in this. End quote. Tobacco in itself would make an interesting feature, but the thrust of this piece is on the device used to enjoy the tobacco. So let's look at prehistoric pipes. From the earliest times, explorers of Michigan have happened across ancient pipes. The noted ethnologist explorer Henry R. Schoolcraft, in his book, The American Indians, gave a fascinating account of the pipe that was found near Alpena, Michigan. Schoolcraft explains, an Indian chief called Black Eagle of River Osable discovered a curious antique pipe of Etruscan ware a few years ago at Thunder Bay near Alpena, Michigan. This pipe, which is now in my possession, is remarkable for its form as for its character of earthenware from which it is made, differing as it does so entirely from the coarse earthen pots and vessels, the remains of which are scattered so generally throughout North America. The form of the pipe is semicircular or horn-shaped, with a quadrangle bowl, and having impressed in the ware ornaments at each angle. I had never before indeed seen any pipes of Indian manufacture of baked clay or earthenware, such articles being generally carved out of steatite, endurite clays, or other soft mineral substances. It is a peculiarity of this pipe that it was smoked from the small end, which is rounded for the purpose of putting it between the lips without the invention of a stem. Schoolcraft continued, the discoverer told me that he had taken it from a very antique grave. A large hemlock tree, he said, had blown down on the banks of the river, tearing it up in its roots. At the bottom of the excavation thus made, he discovered a grave which contained a vase out of which he took the pipe and some other articles. The vase, he said, was broken, so that he did not deem it worthy bringing away. The other articles he described as bones. End quote. A curious side note. Today, it would seem that many Indians are crying because of desecration of their ancient grave sites by scientists who only want to unlock the secrets of their past for them. This is an endeavor, I would think, that should be more appreciated by the descendants, who should desire to learn more about their ancestors who preceded them. At any rate, here we have a case where not only was an Indian interested, he was the one doing the desecration, but he obviously did not see it that way. Maybe today's people should take a lesson from Chief Black Eagle. My interest in prehistoric pipes developed when I uncovered a half-a-clay bowl several years ago. This is at a site named Old Benetton Creek, which has two cultural horizons, middle and late woodland. The pipes are exclusively from the late woodland era. The pipe in question would have been about 5 inches tall. The bowl would have been 2 inches across, and this was an elbow pipe. The surface was very smooth and appeared well made. Being broken in half, some of the secrets of its manufacture were revealed. The pipe was formed around a branch that was whittled down to a point. This formed the main bowl chamber. The stem was formed around a reed or small stick, the impression of which can be easily seen where it terminated in the main bowl. I would imagine that both of these molds were left in place and burned away during the actual firing process. There was no decoration on this bowl at all. Another pipe bowl would have been 3.5 centimeters tall by 1.5 centimeters around. This little elbow pipe was formed in the same way as previously described, but on this one you can actually see the grain of the wood that was used for the mold. Whereas the rim of the first pipe was straight, this smaller one was flared out and had a row of tiny dentates for decorations. Of the 8 partial bowls recovered at Old Manettan Creek, only one was decorated. The rest were either plain surfaced or cord marked. They all appeared to have been formed around molds. As an ex-smoker, I had quit 6 years ago and lived, I wondered if the Indians, like myself, had enjoyed smoking in the evening after their meals. Investigation of this has shown that it was enjoyed both socially and also in religious rites. Let's return for a moment to Henry R. Schoolcraft's book, where he gives an excellent account of domestic and social manners of the Indians while on their wintering grounds. Schoolcraft reported, and I quote, "Let it not be supposed, however, that the Indian life, while on his wintering grounds, is a round of feasting. No, quite the contrary. And his feasts are often followed by long painful fasts, and the severity of the season and scarcity of game and fish often reduced himself and his family to the verge of starvation, even to the point of death. Under all sufferings, the pipe of the hunter is his chief solace, and is a solace often resorted to. Smoking parties are frequently formed when there is a scarcity of food not tending, as might be supposed, to destroy all social feelings and render the temper sour. On these occasions the entertainer sends a message to this effect: 'Come smoke with me. I have no food, but we can pass away the evening very well without it.' All acknowledge their lives to the Great Spirit, feel a conviction that all comes from him, and that although he allows them to suffer, he will again supply them. This tends to quiet their apprehensions. They are fatalists, however, under long reverse, and submit patiently and silently to what they believe to be their destiny. When hunger and misery are past, they are soon forgotten, and their minds are too eagerly intent on the enjoyment of the present good to feel any depression of spirits from want for the future." End quote. W. Vernon Kinnetz wrote an interesting description of the Huron Indians in his book Indians of the Western Great Lakes. In it, Kinnetz said, and I quote, "To render themselves more supple and agile in running, and to purge pus from swollen parts, our Hurons make incisions and cuts with small sharp stones into the fat of their legs. With these stones they also draw blood from their arms for the purpose of joining and sticking together the broken pieces of their pipes and earthenware tobacco-burning tubes. This is an excellent discovery, and a secret that much more admirable, as the pieces glued with the blood are afterwards stronger than they were before." Wow, human superglue. The pipe in the Upper Great Lakes region probably holds the most distinguished use in the Calumet dance. The calumet is a long pipe, recognizable today as a traditional peace pipe. The word calumet was derived by the French from the word chalumeau. The French gave the name early on in their explorations of the region to this long pipe, as it resembled the pipe used by the Norman peasants. This type of pipe seemed to have had a wide distribution in the United States, but the French first met with it in the Green Bay area. In the early years that the French dominated the Great Lakes region, the calumet dance seems to have been limited to the area bordering the Great Lakes and the northern part of the Mississippi Valley. There were many reasons why this dance was performed. It was performed for the reinforcement of peace, for strengthening in war, for public rejoicing, and to ensure a safe trip. Father Bagot, about 1720, learned some interesting facts about this dance. He discovered, 1. The dance was a religious ceremony amongst the nations of the upper Great Lakes region. It was a spirit dance in honor of the Calumet, which was viewed as God to these nations. 2. The words used in the song of the dance are an invocation of the spirit. 3. The calumet was smoked in council, where men whose wives were pregnant could not smoke, or the child would be sickly. And 4. This dance is used against people who are being warred upon. Their souls are called through this dance, and thus was considered a means to kill the enemy without fail. Reasons for the dance also include that the dance was used to make lasting peace between Indian nations. 6, according to the needs of the soil, this dance can be used to produce rain or fair weather. 7, to produce favorable winds while navigating. 8, and lastly, it was used for gaining benefits of all kinds, for warding off evil. In 1667, Allouez wrote a description of the Calumet dance as practiced by the Miami Indians. They acknowledge many spirits, he said, to whom they offer sacrifice. They practice a kind of dance quite peculiar to themselves, which they call the dance of the tobacco pipe. It is executed thus. They prepare a great pipe, which they deck with plumes, and put it in the middle of a room, with a sort of veneration. One of the company rises, begins to dance, and then yields his place to another, and this one to a third, and thus they dance in succession, one after another, and not together. One would take this dance for a pantomime ballet, and it is executed to the beating of a drum. The performer makes war in rhythmic time, preparing his arms, attiring himself, running, discovering the foe, raising the cry, slaying the enemy, removing his scalp, and returning home with a song of victory, and all with astonishing exactness, promptitude, and agility. After they have all danced, one after the other around the pipe, it is taken and offered to the chief man and the whole assembly, for him to smoke, then to another, and so in succession to all. This ceremony resembles in significance the French custom of drinking several out of the same glass, but in addition, the pipe is left in the keeping of the most honored man as a sacred trust and sure pledge of the peace and union that will ever subsist among them as long as it shall remain in that person's hands. Again, Kenneth commented on the coveted pipe, and again I quote, "There is not an entire agreement as to the use of the term calumet. For instance, Charlevoix called the pipe smoked in the councils of the tribe calumets, whereas most other writers spoke of the calumet as being used only in matters of state, such as negotiations of war or alliances or in preparation for voyages, and referred to the ordinary smoking instruments as pipes only. The weight of this documentary evidence is that the Indians were insistent smokers. Rigaud, Lahontan, and Beauchesne all state in substance that almost all the Indians, both men and women, smoked a great deal." End quote. I have found little information on the type of tobacco used in the Indian pipe. Anto Denis Rigaud, in a letter written at Quebec, Canada in 1709, commented, "The men and women savages smoke very much, or one would be better say always. Previously they used an herb called mountain tobacco, but now they smoke black tobacco, or that which is grown here and is very nearly the same quality as that cultivated in France." Probably the most famous northeastern Michigan late woodland site is the Juntunan site. This is located on Bois Blanc Island near Mackinac Island. This area is rich in Indian history and in early contact history. The Juntunan site has produced the only known human effigy pipe in Michigan. The pipe is badly fragmented, but represents a unique use of the ceramic medium. This must have been a very important person to have his image thus preserved, or represent some sort of mythical person. Whatever the case, the human representations are rare. So here you have it. Not a lot of material is available on Michigan prehistoric pipes. However, from looking up the number of fragments I have personally found, I can vouch for the fact that the late woodland Indians loved their tobacco, and they loved their pipes.